Something lovely and unexpected can happen after a child has a very big emotional meltdown while being supported by you all the way through it. They're crying and you get curious. They're screaming and you stay close and listen. They're telling you they never want to talk to you ever again, and you stay by their side. And then, just minutes after their big wave of feeling crashes onto the safety of your steady shoreline, they're happily building Legos or pretending to be a dinosaur and asking if you'll play with them. Or maybe they fall into the deepest sleep you've seen them experience in weeks. Are you a little curious why this might be happening? Understanding why this happens can help you hang in there with their big feelings when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Welcome to Self-Led Parenting Live. I'm Jacqueline Long, licensed marriage and family therapist, founder of Mindful Child and Family Therapy in California, certified parent educator in connection parenting, and certified internal family systems, or IFS, therapist. And each week we explore how understanding our own inner world as parents helps us show up differently for our kids. Because our kids really do benefit when we lead ourselves from a place of calm, clarity, compassion, and connection. But that isn't always easy because parts of us naturally come up in the way. And yet, as we've discovered throughout this series, what's in the way is the way. One of my favorite parts of this community is slowing down together and becoming curious about the things we might have experienced hundreds of times, but perhaps have never really noticed very well before. So today, I'd like to wonder with you about something that's puzzled parents for generations. Maybe you've experienced something like this. Your child has a huge emotional release. They cry, they yell, they stomp their feet, they slam the door. Maybe they tell you, "I hate you." Maybe they've been crying for 20 or 30 or 45 minutes. And you're thinking, wow, this is a really big one. Then, almost unbelievably, they wipe their tears, pick up a stuffed animal, and begin playing. Or they curl up on the couch and fall into a deep, very peaceful sleep. Have you ever wondered, wait, weren't they just devastated? Sometimes parents feel really confused by this. Sometimes they feel relieved. And sometimes, if we're honest, a part of us inside might wonder, were those feelings even real? Or were they manipulating me? Were they just trying to get some attention? Those are understandable parts of us with valid questions, opinions, and concerns. And I'd like to offer another possibility. What if those big emotional moments in our kids and the ensuing recovery process is telling us something important, not only about children, but about the remarkable wisdom of the human nervous system, its self-correcting process? For instance, let's imagine a snow globe. When we shake it up, everything inside becomes cloudy, busy, chaotic. It's hard to see clearly. What if that's like our child's brain, their limbic system, even their body? And if we stay steady and we hold the snow globe in our hand in a still, calm way, not getting swept up in the chaos that's going on in there, not telling the glitter where to go, simply being with it as it is and waiting, we can see that something inside the snow globe already knows how to settle. As long as I hold it calmly and steadily, the settling begins. It's how I hold it that matters most. So I wonder if children's nervous systems sometimes surprise us in similar ways. Because sometimes we find that after a period of emotional turbulence, all chaotic inside, something inside of them begins finding its way back to a calm state. Not because we forced it or convinced it, not because we made them talk about their feelings, but perhaps their nervous system was finally given enough space, enough support and permission to do what it already knows how to do in a self-correcting process. Offload tension, clear out the system, and settle into a deeper state of rest or play. In IFS, Richard Schwartz calls this a constraint and release model. It's a constraint and release model. And it's how we hold our child or our client in their state of constraint that helps them release the most. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about something we call the emotional bladder in connection parenting. We imagined emotions gradually building inside a child over time, like a balloon that's getting bigger and bigger, or a bladder. And one by one, those experiences quietly accumulate inside and build tension in our child. And then along comes our loving limit, which might sound like, no more screen time, sweetie, or it's time to leave the park, my love. And suddenly, the very full emotional bladder, filled to the brim with emotional tension, begins to empty. Not because the limit necessarily causes all of those feelings, but because the limit is a pretext to help the feelings come out. And more importantly, the relationship became safe enough for that big knot of tension inside the child to start releasing safely. And last week, we also talked about the shoreline, how waves gather energy across hundreds of miles before finally reaching the shore, where they get bigger and louder until they crash and ultimately release and subside. And again, we see a model of constraint, building tension, constraint, and then release. And perhaps loving, secure relationships can become that shoreline for our child's feelings. Steady enough, safe enough, strong enough to receive waves that have been traveling for much longer than we realized, building up much more tension than we even knew was there inside. But here's the question that I'd like us to wonder about together today. What typically happens after the wave reaches the shore? Have you noticed in your own homes that after one of your child's biggest emotional storms that you supported them through, that something starts to shift inside of them? Sometimes it's a transition into the ability to play in a calm, relaxed, and open way. Not always, but often. A few minutes ago, they were sobbing. Now they're building a fort. A few minutes ago, they were screaming, "Go away," at the top of their lungs. Now they're inviting you to join them for a tea party. What's going on here? What if play isn't simply changing the subject or causing a distraction or covering up something that was manipulative? What if, at least sometimes, after a good, long, well-supported emotional offloading session, play is one of the ways a child's nervous system lets us know, now that all of the emotional debris is all cleaned out of me, I'm available again. Available for curiosity, for creativity, available for connection, for listening, for learning, and even for following directions. I'm clear and I'm available again. Perhaps after emotional burdens become a little lighter, the ease of life becomes available to our kids again, and thus to us. What if that's a really wonderful payoff for staying calm and coming close as they offload their tension? So, have you ever noticed that after your child's had a really good cry, supported by your loving guidance, that they don't really often want to talk about it. They don't usually want to sit beside you and say, "So I'd like to talk about all my feelings I just had right now, Mom." Instead, they pick up a stuffed animal, they build a fort, they draw a picture, they become a puppy or a dragon or a princess. And contrary to our worst fears, after hearing them scream, "I hate you," for 45 minutes, they want to play with us. Have you ever wondered, what if play is an avoidance? What if at least sometimes play is one of the ways our children tell us without using words, "Mom, I'm available for our connection again. You helped me move all of that emotional smog out of my system, and now I can see clearly again, and now I can feel the love between us again." Perhaps that's one of the beautiful things about children, right? They often don't stay emotionally stuck in the same way that adults sometimes do. Sometimes they feel, they cry, and then they laugh and play, and they begin again, fresh and new. And maybe that's something children can teach us as adults. They can remind us what's possible after a deeply supported offloading session. In IFS, we call this an unburdening. It's deeply, deeply healing for the whole system, in a child, in a teen, in an adult system. I've also noticed something else over the years that I wanted to share with you. When I've supported my own son with releasing his emotional tension, and also when I've supported many other parents to do the same with their kids. Maybe you've noticed it too. Sometimes, after one of the biggest crying sessions a child has all week, they sleep deeply, peacefully, sometimes more deeply than they have in weeks. Have you ever watched your child sleeping after a deep emotional release that was really well supported by your loving presence? I wonder what might be happening in their nervous system. I wonder whether, at least sometimes, after clearing out the emotional smog, something inside them has become available for deep rest and recuperation again. Perhaps because they aren't carrying quite as much inside by themselves anymore. Sometimes the most healing thing a child does after a big emotional storm that clears all of the smog away is sleep, a very deep and restorative sleep, a sleep that helps them function even better and feel even better for the next several days. Another wonderful payoff for all of our good, loving listening as they have a big meltdown. And here's something else I've noticed. Sometimes our children move on long before we do as their parents. Has that ever happened to you? Your child says, "I hate you," for 20 minutes. You stay calm, you come close, you work with your inner world so you can be there and listen. Then, after the dust settles, they're asking you if you'll help them build a fort out of pillows and blankets. And meanwhile, a part of you is still replaying every word they said. Maybe this part of you wonders, did they really mean it? Do they really hate me? Should I talk to them about what they said? What if this keeps happening? What if this gets worse as they get older? Very good questions. Sometimes our child's storm has already passed, while ours has only just begun. And what's true is that their emotional storm is likely to kick up our emotional storm. Their parts tend to activate our parts. And that's okay, because we're human too. And as we've talked about throughout this series, one of the most powerful parenting tools that we have is making a U-turn. A U-turn is a way to include ourselves and our parts so we can become more available for our child and their parts. Maybe a hurt part of us inside is still wondering about their wave. Maybe a worried part is thinking, "Am I doing this all wrong?" Maybe an exhausted part is thinking, "I don't know if I can keep doing this." Those parts deserve our compassion. Just because our child has returned to play doesn't mean our own nervous system has settled yet. All of the little particles in our snow globe might still be spinning. So perhaps before we join our child in play, we gently come back to ourselves first. We do the U-turn so we can gently return back home to ourselves and then to each other. And I also want to return to an idea we explored last week when we imagined becoming the shoreline for our child's crashing wave. Soft, yet steady, warm, yet grounded. And today I'd like to add one more thought to that idea. Have you ever noticed that the shoreline doesn't chase the wave back out to sea? That the shoreline doesn't berate the wave for crashing on its shore? It simply remains steady, present, available as that wave subsides. And eventually, another wave comes. It builds, crashes, and releases its energy. And another, and another. The shoreline isn't surprised or injured. It doesn't wonder whether it's failing because waves continue arriving. It simply keeps being a safe place for the ocean to meet the sand, so it can release the tension it's been carrying inside itself. Perhaps parenting sometimes looks like this too. Not expecting there to be only one storm. Not expecting one big offloading session to solve everything. Not expecting one clear conversation to make all future limits easy. Perhaps it's about becoming the kind of relationship that children can return to again and again and again, to build safety, to develop a security that the child can one day carry inside themselves and eventually share with their own children. It's the gift that keeps on giving. While I was thinking about today's episode, another image came to my mind. Imagine walking through a forest after a heavy rainstorm. Everything becomes quiet, except for the rain. Then after the rain passes, little by little, you begin hearing birds again. A squirrel comes out onto a branch. Sunlight filters through the trees. The forest isn't pretending that the storm never happened. It simply becomes available for life again. Things have cleared out, and then life emerges in an easeful, joyful way. I wonder if children sometimes do something similar inside. After the real tears fall, after the real anger is offloaded, after the real disappointment is processed through their meltdown, play begins to peek out like a squirrel on a branch. Laughter returns like a bird singing its song. Curiosity reappears. Sleep comes naturally. Connection feels easy again. Perhaps because the clouds finally had somewhere safe to release all the raindrops they'd been carrying. So, before we close today, I'd love to leave you with a few thoughts to carry into your week ahead. Sometimes big feelings are followed by big play. Sometimes big feelings are followed by deep sleep. Sometimes they're followed by laughter. Sometimes they're followed by quiet connection. And perhaps these moments are worth noticing because they might gently remind us that children's nervous systems know how to keep moving toward the ease and joy of life, especially when they're supported with our warmth, connection, and safety. So today we wondered whether perhaps the goal isn't simply to help our children calm down when they're emotional. Perhaps the goal is to help them release their tension by being their steady shoreline so they can release and become available for life again. available for play, available for learning, for rest, joy, and connection. And maybe as we support our kids again and again, we become more available too. Before we close today, I'd like to read you a letter. This one is written from the perspective of a child to their parent. Dear Mom or Dad, I know I confuse you sometimes. A little while ago, I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. I screamed how much I hated you. I tried really hard to push you away. I said things I didn't really mean or understand. And then, after I got it all out, I wanted to build a fort and have a tea party and kick a soccer ball and cuddle beside you on the couch. Maybe that seemed strange to you. Maybe part of you wondered if I was just trying to get your attention. I wasn't. But I did need your attention, a particular kind of attention. Your warm, steady, loving attention that can truly be with me as I feel my very big feelings. Because sometimes they feel too big for me to feel all by my very own self. And I need you there with me to help me get them out. My feelings are real, every one of them. And sometimes after I cry and you stay close and listen, my body feels lighter. Sometimes my heart feels lighter too. And when that happens, I don't need another conversation about my feelings. I can't always put it all into words. I don't really understand it very well. I just need permission to be a kid again. And it helps me when you followed me as I play, laugh, rest, and sleep. So, Mom and Dad, thank you for staying close enough, for being safe enough, for all of my feelings to come tumbling out so that I don't have to carry all those big feelings by myself anymore. When you stay nearby, even when I push you away, you help me find my way back to play, back to curiosity, back to the ease and joy of life. I may not always remember this day, but my nervous system will remember how I felt, how it felt to find my way back to you as you stayed steady by my side. Love always, your kid. Let's take a moment to let that letter land. In closing, thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If today's conversation resonated with you, I hope you'll share it with another parent you know. Because I think many of us grew up believing that emotional health and emotional regulation develops by never making emotional waves. But perhaps emotional health develops a little differently. Perhaps it looks like having safe places where emotional waves can build, crash, and release, and be loved and supported all along the way. Safe relationships where emotional storms don't have to be carried alone, and where, after the rain, the ease of life quietly returns again to be enjoyed together. So this week, I wonder what you might notice in the safety of your own home. Maybe after a big, well-supported cry, you'll notice your child playing. Maybe you'll notice them sleeping deeply after 45 minutes of emotional release. Maybe you'll notice yourself becoming a little more curious and a little less afraid of the emotional storms. Because storms don't last forever. And perhaps one of the greatest gifts we can offer our children isn't helping them avoid every storm. Perhaps it's becoming a safe harbor, a steady shoreline, a secure relationship where they get to discover again and again that they don't have to weather the storms alone, and that after the storm, the ease of life and the depth of our love is still there, just waiting for them. Here's to becoming available for the joy and ease of life again. And I'll see you next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific.